This is Oregon Sunstone. It comes from the Double Eagle Mining Company. I got it from John probably fairly recently, probably 2 years ago. And it's a fairly large piece. It's 30.5 carats. So let's go ahead and cut this Oregon Sunstone. So let's look at our Sunstone in refractol. Refractol is going to help us kind of see in through the stone and see if there's any internal issues. And actually this stone's fairly clean. Other than on the surface, there's a lot of work to be removed from the surface, but internally pretty clean. I see some fractures near the surface, issues. So other than surface chatter, I don't see a whole lot of problems with this stone. Okay, so for our Sunstone, I need to do a little preforming, get some of the surface issues out of the way. So I'm going to use my 320 grit topper. Also, I want to grind a flat spot on the stone so that I can use my super glue and adhere the stone to the dop. So just with hand, just preform, clean up the stone a little bit. So I'll just continue to clean the stone. As I mentioned, this piece of rough came from the Double Eagle number 16 mine near Lakeview, Oregon. John and Debbie started exploratory digging and sampling of ore in midsummer of 2007. And by late summer, open pit mining was started, and they've been producing Oregon Sunstone crystals ever since. Now they do offer fee digging, so if you want to go dig your own Oregon Sunstones, you can go to their mine and who knows, maybe you'll find a beauty. If you do, let me know. Now, as I was looking through the Gemology Project website for interesting gem fasting diagrams, I came across one called Diamond Cushion by Lisa Elser. Now, I know Lisa from several United States Fasting Guild symposiums that we've attended, but I've never cut one of her designs before. Well, this design looks very interesting and very unique, so why not give it a try? A note in the size data that the H to W ratio is 0.784. That is the height to width ratio, and although it's not outside of the common range of cushion cut designs, it is on the thick side of the average cushion design. So this design will produce a gemstone where the pavilion is a bit deeper compared to many other cushion cut designs. That's just something to note that when you're evaluating a piece of rough to cut with this design. My rough is thick, so this design will work very well with this piece of Oregon Sunstone. Okay, I've preformed our Oregon Sunstone, got most all the inclusions, the internal fractures out, lost a lot of rough doing it, but it was inexpensive, so relatively inexpensive rough, so I'm not worried about that. So now I'll continue to work on this stone. I did not do the final row of facets. I'll save that to the end because that'll cut with a finer grit. So now I'll use probably a 600 grit topper. Okay, I polished the bottom half of our Oregon Sunstone. I used creamway lap and cerium oxide and water spray. Polished right up. I went straight to polish from my 12M lap, a 1300, about a 1500 grit lap. I didn't use the 8K or the anything else to preform it other than my 12M. Okay, I'm ready to cut and polish the final set of instructions, the final row, the P6 set of instructions, which will put 4 facets, one on each side, coming down here, here, and so forth on each side. Now, I haven't touched this row of facets at all, and And now that I've polished the rest of the stone, I'm ready to polish these facets in. I think I just need to polish them in. They're very small facets. They're going to cut very quickly. And the risk, if I would have used any other lap other than my polish lap, is that I could have overcut these facets. So let me show you on the Gem Cut Studio cutting assistant what we're going to do here. I've prepared a number of tutorials on how to use the Gem Cut Studio or GCS software, so I won't go into detail here on how to use this cutting assistant feature. Here is a link to a playlist of all the GCS tutorials that I created if you're interested in learning more about GCS. What I'm doing is using the cutting assistant to visualize how these 4 final facets on the pavilion will look. The facets are small and they will cut fast. And I find that having a computer generated visual of cutting these facets before I actually cut on my Oregon Sunstone helps me out. Okay, to cut the final row of our pavilion, we want an angle of 42 degrees on our machine. We want the index tooth to be the 96, 24, 48, and 72. Those are the indexes we're going to cut. I'm going to use my creamway lap and polish it in. Now, John Rolfe at Gearloose says that the creamway should work, just polishing it in without adding any cerium oxide to it. Should work fine. I find that it doesn't work as good for me unless I kind of supercharge it. So I have my spray bottle, which I have cerium oxide and water. And so I just give a squirt or two to my lap and I'm ready to go. So okay, I polished in our P6 line of instruction, which is just a small facet that just goes here down to here on all 4 sides. And again, I was right to just polish it in. You don't want to use your preforming laps and try to mess with those very small facets, or you'll just overcut and cause a mess. So save those 4 facets to the end, polish them in with your polishing lap, and it'll work out just fine. So now I'm going to transfer our stone and cut the upper half of our Oregon Sunstone. Okay, I've finished pre-polishing the 2 steps, 2 rows of instruction for the step cuts on the crown, and I used my 12M, and I could go to polish from my 12M, but I'm going to instead use my 13,000 grit diamond on a bat lap just to pre-polish these and get the lines exactly where I want them. And then with this set of instructions for this design, we cut the table next and then come back, and that's because we want to put a diamond on each side, kind of an upside down triangle and a right side up triangle on each step, which makes a kind of a diamond. And in order to get them lined up, we want the distance between each step the same and everything everything, the lines nice and even. So I think in this case I'm going to use a 13,000 grit diamond and pre-polish just to make sure everything's where I want it, and then cut the table and then come back and polish and put in those diamonds. Okay, I've pre-polished the top 2 rows of facets up on the crown. I used 13,000 grit diamond on a bat lap. So now I'm going to, for this design, I'm going to remove the dot from our spindle of our machine and set it up to cut the table. Normally I cut the table last, but in this particular design, we want to cut and polish the table, and then we want to make sure that there's an equal space between the girdle and this line and the crown. So basically we want these 2 steps to be equal. And that's because as we cut the bottom part of the diamond here and the top part of the diamond here, we want the points to touch the girdle and the crown, and we want the sides to match. So in order to do that, we need step cuts of equal length. So we're going to cut 4 diamonds in the end into each, one into each of the sides. So let me cut and polish the table next. So the table polished right up with the creamway lap, and I use cerium oxide spray. So now I will take the stone out of my table adapter and put it back into the spindle of my Ultratech and continue to cut and polish the rest of the crown. Okay, the last thing I need to do with this gemstone is to cut a kind of an upside down triangle here on the first row, and then a right side up triangle on the second row, which will be a kind of a diamond on each of the 4 sides. So I'm going to use my 8,000 grit diamond on the zinc lap to work on that. So I'll just continue to walk this point down to the girdle, and that'll be the bottom half, and I'll do that on all 4 of the all 4 sides. Okay, I finished cutting the kind of triangles, the diamonds, the bottom half on all 4 sides. I left just a little space as I'm going to walk it down to the girdle with my polishing lap. I'll use a creamway with cerium oxide. So what I'll do next is cut the upper half triangle going this way with a point that just touches, just not quite touches the table, and I'll polish it in. So I didn't do any of these facets. I didn't cut any of these facets with anything other than my 8,000 grit diamond on a bat lap. If I would have used a rougher lap to preform it or anything else, I would have risked overcutting and putting that point down into the girdle, and I didn't want to do that. So now I'll change my angle to 34 degrees and cut the upper triangle on this upper tier, this upper row of facets. Okay, I had to cheat a little bit. This angle on the bottom was 36 degrees and on the top was 34, and I had to adjust them ever so slightly, like maybe 35.8 on the bottom and 34, 34.3, 33.8. And I had to adjust them just to get that top to touch and the line to line up and the bottom to touch. So don't be afraid to use your micro adjuster, or as we call it, the cheater, to get the all the angles just right. Otherwise, I had this line down a little bit when I finally got the top in, and that's because this tier and this tier are not perfectly equal in length. They're as close as I could get them, but the micro adjuster made it so that the lines there and the points of these diamonds all line up, so it's just the way I want it. So now we'll soak the stone in acetone, remove the adhesive, and weigh it, measure it, and see what it looks like, and send it off to BOPIE. Today I cut a piece of Oregon Sunstone using a design called Diamond Cushion. This design is a bit unusual, and it requires the cutter to cut and polish the table before finishing the rest of the crown. Normally I polish the table last. But after polishing the table, the instructions are to go back and cut and polish a diamond into each of the 4 sides on the crown. A very unique design. This design cuts fast, and again, it cuts a very unique gemstone. A new cutter may find it a bit challenging to get the diamonds on the sides of the crown just right. So I wouldn't recommend this design for a brand new cutter, but I think that after having cut a handful of stones, any cutter would have no problem with this design. Please let me know in the comments what you think of this design and of the Oregon Sunstone that I cut using this design. And as always, happy fasting, everyone.